Hello, welcome to Module 1 of HSM 220. For this first module, we'll be discussing searching and citing academic articles in essays. This lecture specifically, I'm going to more or less like give you background information. There are a number of other videos that I've provided that you can use that goes more deep into the how to actually do the academic writing and getting the citations. Those you will get in the other lecture videos, but for this one, I'm just going to talk in general. Just kind of give you a very broader context for why it is important that you're doing this. So, have a couple of learning objectives. For the first one, I'm going to basically identify the basics for searching for academic literature, and then identify databases that I use for health related journal articles or academic literature. And then lastly, I'm going to put you guys through how to begin to draft a short essay that is going to meet the expectations of an academic writing. I am going to state what those expectations are, so I'm not just leaving you out in the open. So, learning objectives, why academic search? So, why can't you wing it? I know some people may be wondering what's this stress about? Why can't I just wing it? I know what I'm saying, so why can't I just say this? For one thing, this is not a social media discourse. In social media, there is no structured way of talking or typing or tweeting. You just basically just whatever is in your mind, you just say it. It does not work that way in an academic essay. Academic essays are structured and there are expectations about how you need to do that. So understanding what that structure is and the expectations of those structures is one way of understanding, okay, this is why I cannot wing it, because we don't wing it, in this context. And everything you say should be backed up by science. And one of ways of saying that is that trust me, I know. It doesn't cut it. We don't deal in trust me, I know business when it comes to science. We want to see, something, that is backing whatever it is that you're saying, because unless you're having evidence to back up whatever you're saying, for all we know, you may not, know what it is that you're talking about. So we want to know that you know what you're talking about by knowing where you got the information that you are talking about. So where did you know what you know from? That is something that is very important. By you providing a backup for the information that you know, then we get to know, okay, fine, this is where your information is coming from. The reason why we want to know where your information is coming from is because when we determine the source of your information, then we can then say whether we believe that what you're saying is credible or not. If the source of your information is not credible, then whatever it is that you're saying is not credible. So it's important that we know where your knowledge is coming from as a way of determining whether what there's a correct basis for that. So that's how that goes. And if so, this means that if your source of information is questionable, we will question your knowledge. So it's very important, that your knowledge is backed by science, and the science that is backed by is strong science. So where does your information source come from? So, we all know science has existed for centuries, but just what we know today in 2023 has been an update in what has been, some of them has been things that have been known, for centuries and stuff. And with new knowledge, we keep updating the information that we know. This means that it is very unlikely that you are the first person with the knowledge that you have. So because you're not the first person with the knowledge that you have, the idea is that you are building off what somebody else have written. You are not an expert, right? We do not expect at the level that you are now to be an expert. And we are not in the era of untrained mad scientists, but even back then, the days of Aristotle and all of them, Galileo, I think, they were not untrained. Usually they do train other under another scientist, and then from their knowledge, training, they can now build up on the knowledge. So basically, whatever you know on the science is a build up of what somebody else has known. So you're either improving it because you're seeing it from a different perspective that they didn't, or somehow you were able to spot an error on what it is that they had, the information that they had passed on initially, and from thorough review, you were able to notice, oh, there was an error in this, and this is how to fix that error. So that is how that goes. So every new knowledge is a build up from old knowledge, right? And the good thing about information source is that they keep a trail of all of this knowledge, the old one and the new one. So this way we are able to compare what is known before and what is known now, and that way we can see the evolution of knowledge, how we used to think in a certain way and how we think in this way, and how we went from thinking in this in the way that we used to think and the way that we think now, how that evolution happens. So that is what the information source does for us. So, but yeah, why then use academic journals for our source of information? So, basically, the understanding that academic journals are evidence-based. The reason we say that is evidence-based is because there is an assumption of rigor in the way that you conduct your science, and you conduct your research, and then the paper that comes out of the research that you conducted. This being that papers that are published in academic journals go through what is called a peer review process. This means that people in that field read your work, and based off on their own training, their education, and their knowledge, they're able to tell whether there is a strong basis for what you've written, or there's strong science behind what you've written. And if there are some things that they feel there's some weaknesses to it, they can point you out to you and say, hey, I think you can have another look at this, just to strengthen your argument and make your paper much better. So that peer review process introduces rigor in the paper. So meaning that whatever article, ideally, that gets published in academic journals have gone through, the car wash of a say, and kind of cleaned up the impurities to come up. And what we then have is something that has, can stand the test of time and the test of science. What what that does is that it controls for bad science, right? So if someone is putting out information based on, science that is weak, or science that is not that is not acceptable. Let me use that word, acceptable. During the peer review process, it can be something that can be spotted out, and some of the time the bad science is not intentional, so that when it's spotted, the researcher is able to make corrections, and if it is intentional, and due to unscrupulous practices, they'll be able to kind of weed that out, so it doesn't get into the public domain. So that is one of the things that come in with the rigor. So, and the reason being is because rigor is kind of standardized. So there have been some things, particularly in health science, in health research, that has been systematically determined to be acceptable, and some things that have been determined to be unacceptable. So for the most part, when people are reading through these research papers, they are reading at it based off on the systems, what has been deemed, okay, this is what a good paper should do, and this is what a good research should do, and that way it is a standard that is applied to everybody, and so you're not it's a lot less objective, as objective as it can be. It's more objective than it is subjective. So that is one of the things that does with that. But it's not a perfect system. There's always going to be room for improvement. But for now, this is what we have as the way of making sure that we have good science, and the information that we are putting out is based off on good science. So it's not a perfect system, but it's not a bad system. So, so when you are writing essays, does that mean you have to use only information coming from academic journals? The answer is yes, but the answer is also no. The reason why I say that is because when informations are coming from government agencies, those information are typically deemed as being acceptable. And the reason being that the premise is that this information is coming based off on science. Them being government agencies means that there's been some investment in science, and that's the reason why whatever information is coming up is not just people just talking out of their heads. Something that's been backed up by science. The second thing is that for especially government agencies, you have people who are staking their reputation on the line, and therefore they're going to be less likely to be passing on misinformation or disinformation because they have taken on that role as experts. They want to be kind of their concession, they pay attention to knowing that the things that they say has to be something that can that is true, at least, or true within the context of what the science knows. Of course, that does not mean that 2 years down the line it would always be true. It just means within the context of what we know and what is known at the moment, that is the truth. So that kind of goes on. But like I said, we build off on information and build off on knowledge. So, and that carries on, including with expert knowledge. So, professional associations are also, acceptable forms of information, and that's something like the American Medical Associations. Those are professional associations that are, also very good, place sources of information, and so this and is for the same reason that expert knowledge is. Expert people with expertise are kind of considered a correct source. So, where do you find academic papers? So, you kind of want to go with journal databases. Now, I want to get you guys to separate. There is data. There's databases that has to do with raw data. It's not the same thing as journal databases. So when we're talking about journal databases, we're talking about places where you can go to find academic journals, just so that you understand, what I'm talking about. So the reason why for this course there's a preference for academic journals is because they have a wider and broader range of information. These journals have thousands and thousands of academic papers that kind of have been stored there. So, which means that you have a much broader room to look for information, and there's a very good likelihood that you can find it in the way that you may not be able to find it in, let's say, the website of American Medical Association, or even the United UN or something like that. So journals, academic journals, going from the journal databases, really have a rich, range of information that you can pick. And and because it's this rich, source of information, it means that information there is a lot easier to find, because there are systematic ways of looking for the information and finding them, which is not necessarily in the same way as websites. And another thing is that some journal databases include websites publications as well. So that is another good thing about it. So there's some website information gets captured in the journal databases, not quite in the same way as websites having those journal information. So that's why journals databases are a preferred preference for this course. So another very great thing is it is easier to cite their sources. So there's a systematic way that citation happens, both the in-text citation and the bibliography. So a lot of the journal databases already have those prepared for you, so you don't have to manually do that. All you just basically have to do is to find where they have already put out what the citation should look like, and just copy and paste that in your citation. So that makes it quite an easier source of where to get your information for. That's why I kind of lean more towards it. So there are a number of journal databases. I have a preference for PubMed, but you can also check out Ovid or Google Scholar. The additional video that I included, or the lectures, shows you how to use PubMed and how to use Google Scholar, which you can check out. I use both of them, but you could just decide which one you're more comfortable using. And there is, of course, university libraries provide also a basis for journals. SLU has the same library, which has their own a lot of journals in there. And you can also use the Ask a Librarian function that can give you a quick question answer. Well, I think it takes like 24 hours. Ask when you're looking for data sources or databases or data, or even journals that to kind of find information. You can please use that function. It's very helpful. So, but if you also need additional help in how to search the journal databases, I would suggest you schedule a consultation with a librarian, and they would also kind of help put you through that as well. So lastly, then we're going to talk about drafting your essay. So first things first, you want to begin with deciding the following. First, what is your topic of interest? If you don't understand what your topic of interest is, your essay is going to not do well. It's going to fall flat, and you don't want to do that. So you want to first of all understand what your topic of interest is, so that from there you know where to begin. And then if it's a debate, if it's something that's asking you to take a position, you kind of may want to, decide prior, right from the bat, this is a position that you wish to take, if that's what you want to do. But you could also, choose to, look at both sides of the argument, and then based upon the information that you have gathered, decide then which position to take. But you can also, right off the bat say, okay, no, I want to go argue for, and then look for information to back up that position that you have chosen to take. So that's ways to go about it. And then you begin by skimming through the databases. I personally advise that you skim through as many databases as possible, so that some journals will be in one database and not in the other. So being able to skim through different ones kind of helps, really helps you broaden your search. So I generally advise the students do this. And then after you've done through the skimming, you can then select a few appropriate papers. I typically advise that you don't start with too many, so that you don't get overwhelmed. Then, of course, the question of what too many is very subjective. Is what you call too many may be very different what the next person calls too many. So it's really something that you need to figure out what your comfort levels are in deciding how many is enough. And then after you've selected the papers, then you skim through the papers. You really want to skim through the papers, and then kind of helps you after you skim through the papers. That then helps you in outlining your essay with the information that you have gathered from the papers. So how you write your essay should be informed by the information you got from the papers. So this way, it makes your writing of the essay so much more smoother. You don't want to begin by writing the essay first and then look for the information. You want to first of all go from getting the information from the paper and writing the essay. So that's the way to go about that. So now you want to outline the essay. A well-structured paper must have the following. It has to have an introduction, it has to have a body, and it has to have a conclusion. So what your introduction is your general overview of the topic, and then your body is the meat of the essay. I have found students spending too much time on introduction and too little time on the body itself. If an essay is worth 20 points, for an example, 50% or if not 70% of that point goes into the body. So no matter how long your introduction is, you are not going to get much points out of it. So you don't want to spend all your time writing a lengthy introduction. It's going to be time wasted, time and effort wasted. So you don't want to do that. So the most of your energy, the most of your information needs to go into the body, not the introduction, and definitely not your conclusion. What your conclusion is a summary of or the deductions that you got from the body. So you're summarizing the body, and that's what is going to be in your conclusion. So I'm going to use a few examples. So let's say a topic is, how does the healthcare system in the US compare to the healthcare system in other countries? Now, your essay is restricted to points that are related to healthcare system. You have to stick to conversations or sentences that's related to healthcare system. If you write anything that is outside healthcare system, you are out of scope, right? And then another thing, you were told to compare countries. Do just that. If the instruction says compare countries, and then you go ahead and you start comparing the regions within the US or start comparing the states within the US, you are out of scope. Even if you meet the number of words, what you have written is out of scope and is outside what you were told to write. So you're not going to do well in that essay. I would say that you probably are going to fail. So you don't want to do that. Try to stay within the scope of the assignment or within the scope of the essay. Don't spend your time doing anything that is outside what you were told to do. And then this topic that I've just mentioned here, what it doesn't do is to restrict you to the number of countries to compare or the geographical locations of the countries, which means you can go as far as possible. You can compare 20 countries, 50 countries. You can go as much. You can also compare only 2 countries, just maybe United States and another state. There is no restriction. However, if there is a restriction, let's just, for example, it says compare with a health system in other countries in North America, then you're restricted to North America and you are looking at US versus Mexico and Canada. You're not going any further from that. So you want to make sure that you stick within the whatever limitations that has been imposed on your essay. Don't go beyond that, because you're not going to be, all that time and effort is basically wasted, and you don't want to do that. So to reiterate, your introduction is your general overview, and what you do here is this, using the topic that I talked about comparing healthcare systems. What you're doing is, let's say in your introduction, you're describing, for an example, what a healthcare system is, or you could be summarizing what the US healthcare system is. You talk about how it's funded and how it operates and things like that. That could be something to go into your introduction. Then your body, you can now do the comparative piece, right? This is where you do the comparison. And I always sometimes find students mistaking description for comparison. It's not the same thing. Let's use, for example, if what you have written is something like, this is what orange is and this is what apple is. What you have done is description. You have described that. That's not what comparison is. If you're comparing, you are either doing something like orange is A, B, and C, while apple is C, E, and H, right? You're using features of orange and comparing it to features of apple. You're doing comparison. Or you could be saying, okay, orange has A, B, C, but apple only has B. you have to be comparing. There has to be something in your essay that shows that you are looking at orange from the lens of apple, or you're looking at apple from the lens of orange. You're not going to talk about them as if they are mutually exclusive. You don't have, that's not what comparison is. So body, in your body, always use subheadings and paragraphs. What that does is that it improves the clarity of your point. When you have run-on paragraphs, I have seen some students write essays and they have just one paragraph, or they have two paragraphs. That is a torture to read. And if your intention was to use your essay as a torture material, then, job well done. But if that's not your intention, please use subheadings and paragraphs, because it makes reading your essay so much more easier, and it's a lot whatever point you're trying to make is made a lot clearer and quicker. So you don't use paragraphs and subheadings. They're there for your use, right? So please use them. And your conclusion, in the example that I've given here, it should be briefly summarizing the information that you have in your introduction and the information that you have in your summary. For an example, what your conclusion could say in the example that I used is something like, what the healthcare system in the US is, and then kind of your summary of how that compares to the other systems in the other countries. For example, you could say this is what the US healthcare system is better at, and this is what the UK, for an example, healthcare system is better at. That would be a comparison. That would be what would be in your conclusion. Do not make your conclusion lengthy. Ideally stick to 2 to 3 short paragraphs. Don't That's another mistake I see in some students. The body of the essay is so short, and then they use the conclusion and the introduction to make up for the word limits. That's not going to gain you much points in an essay that you're writing that way. So do go ahead and practice, and I hope that this class kind of helps you make it easier for you to write your first essay for this course. Do you have a lovely day? Bye.